What's happening, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. My main topic today is going to be potential trade ups for Green Bay, and more specifically, what they would have to do to trade up, what potential trades could be there, and maybe more importantly, what players they could potentially be targeting with trade ups in the draft. So that's going to be my main topic for today. Before I get there, I just want to quickly shout out Aaron Rodgers for his performance on Jeopardy. Certainly a lot of fun as a Packer fan to be able to see your starting quarterback go out and host Jeopardy and just kind of have the presence and the wherewithal. And I think the best thing I can say about it is, there's that initial moment where you're like, there's Aaron Rodgers and he's hosting Jeopardy. But then after a minute or so, it felt exactly like Jeopardy. It didn't feel any different than, an Alex Trebek hosting or anyone else. It felt natural. It felt like a game show. It felt like Jeopardy. Everything flowed perfectly, and you just kind of lost yourself in the game after a while. And then he would come on and you'd readjust, and you're like, oh yeah, that's Aaron Rodgers that's hosting it. So I don't think there's a bigger compliment that you can give than that, the fact that it felt like normal Jeopardy. And, he was certainly entertaining when given the opportunities. I thought his, back and forth when the contestant wrote what about the field goal or whatever, just all very good television, right? And of course, on the Pat McAfee show earlier in the day and a couple other interviews he did, he made mention that this is something he wants to do full time. Now, he said it in the context that he thinks he can do both. He thinks he can be the starting quarterback and, record the episodes when he's not playing and things like that. So that's certainly probably within the realm of possibility with how they, kind of tape the episodes and things like that. Whether they would want to go in that direction or not, who knows? But I thought that was a hell of a first impression, and certainly something that he could build off of moving forward. So I think it's going to be an interesting couple weeks watching him on Jeopardy. I think it was a lot of fun on Monday, and looking forward to it again on Tuesday. So kudos Aaron Rodgers. Besides being an MVP quarterback multiple times, Super Bowl champion, philanthropist. What else do you want? The ability to go out and host Jeopardy and enhance that Q rating even more. Just very, very impressive. And I thought that was a lot of fun, I'm sure, for most Packer fans as well. All right, let's jump into the main topic today, and that is potential trades, or more specifically trade ups and trade up scenarios for the Packers. And the interesting thing here is, in a lot of ways, Green Bay has kind of set their own market. 3 times in the past few seasons, they have traded up from right around pick 29 to move up in the draft. So last year, of course, as you are very well aware of and probably have memorized at this point, they moved pick 30 and 136 up to get Jordan Love at pick 26. So it cost them a first round pick and a fourth round pick to move up about 4 spots. So this year they're at 29th and 135th. So they're a spot up. Maybe they could get up to 25, but you certainly would be able to make an argument they could get to 26. Now, it takes 2 to tango, right? So the team that's trading down has to have interest in trading down as well. So you have to have a partner here. But assuming that a team at 25, 26 is willing to trade down, you would think a very similar deal to what Green Bay did to get to pick 26 a season ago would likely be on the table. And again, that would be their first round pick, pick 29, and their fourth round pick, pick 135 to move up, again, 4 to 5 spots in the draft. And if Green Bay does do that, the nice thing here is, yes, that takes away their fourth round pick, but remember they have a comp fourth pick. So they're not out of the fourth round entirely like they were a season ago. They still have that additional fourth rounder. So they're still picking first, second, third, fourth, even when making a deal like this. So maybe you move up a handful of spots, 3, 4, 5 spots using that extra fourth round pick. Maybe it's their fourth round or their comp fourth round that they end up trading in that scenario. But certainly could see a scenario where if there's a player that they like on the board and they really want to make sure that they get them, that moving up and giving up one of those fourth round picks could be within the realm of possibility. Of course, when they traded for Darnell Savage, they also made a similar type of deal. So they traded up from pick 30 and they had picks 114 and 118 to get to pick 21 in that scenario, which, by the way, sidebar here, Darnell Savage was drafted 21 overall and still didn't take jersey number 21. Like, the obvious was 21 Savage, right? But then I didn't even realize or put together that he was also picked number 21. Like, it was right there for the taking. And if you remember, he wanted to change it afterwards, but it was a mess. And then he decided just to keep 26. But come on, Darnell, 21 Savage was right there for you. You got picked 21. Missed opportunities, to say the least. But I digress. So pick 30, 114, and 118 for pick 21. Now, they don't really have anything around pick 114 or 118. They have pick 92, they've got pick 135. So those are kind of sandwiched in the middle there. If you look at the kind of trade value chart, and I use over the caps, I think they have the best one. Basically, what it would take here to get up to around 21 in a similar type of trade would be pick 29, 92, and 173. So that's their first, their third, and their fifth, if you're again comparing kind of apples to apples. So Green Bay wants to get in that pick 21, 22 range. You're probably looking at their first, their third, and then their one of their fifth round picks, either 173 or 178. Probably either would work. So that's probably what you're looking at to get to pick 21. Let's say you wanted to be super aggressive and maybe get around pick 10, 11, 12, and there was a player that you absolutely loved and, you're going quote unquote all in this season. Well, the Chiefs trade for Patrick Mahomes kind of sets the bar here. So they traded pick 27, 91, and a future first for pick 10 overall. So again, Green Bay has pick 29, so a little bit worse than 27. They have pick 92, so one pick worse than 91. And then of course could still trade their future first, although Green Bay's would probably be projected better than what Kansas City's was at that given time. But still, you got to think, their first, their third, and a future first. Maybe it doesn't get them to 10, but probably pick 11, 12, somewhere in there. So if they wanted to take this, huge jump to go up and get somebody, maybe they could move up from 29 to 12 or, 12 or 11, somewhere in there. Do I see Brian Gutekunst doing that? No. But at least there's been some sort of deal in the last handful of seasons that you can kind of at least put together and show, hey, this has kind of happened in the past. And then last but not least, the Jair Alexander trade. They traded picks 27, 76, and 186 for 18 and 248 to get Jair Alexander. So basically that would be picks, their first round pick, their second round pick, and their sixth round pick. Take that seventh rounder they got in return away, but their first, second, and sixth right around there to get to pick 18 or 19. So, again, I don't see Ryan Gutekunst using a second maybe to move up that far, but again, if they want to get to pick 18, that's the type of deal that you'd be looking at. So you want to get to pick 26, use a fourth to get up in that range. You want to get to pick 21, probably going to cost you a third and a fifth. You want to get to pick 18, probably going to cost you about a second and a sixth. You want to get to pick 10, probably going to cost you a third and a future one. All of this on top of already pick 29, of course. So there's deals potentially available. Those are what it's probably going to take, at least their roundabouts, to get to any of those positions. So that's what type of deals it could take to get up. Now, I think the more important question here is who could they potentially be targeting to move up for? And my guess is there are a couple of you already that have been chomping at the bit, or maybe already couldn't even hold hold it any longer and had to get it out. The joke, of course, is that they'd probably be trading up for a quarterback or a running back, right? Because I've seen it in all of my mentions, and of course, that's what they're going to be trading for. Good joke, I get it. But of course, I think the real easy thing is there's some positions that you can pretty easily eliminate. Quarterback and running back, they don't have the ability to trade up for or even draft at pick 29 for that matter. So doesn't matter how much you love Travis Etienne. Doesn't matter if, one of the quarterbacks starts to fall. They got Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. They're not trading up or selecting a quarterback, and doesn't matter what happens at running back. They're not going to be able to put anything together at that position either. They've got A.J. Dillon. They've got Aaron Jones. That would be a massive malpractice to trade up for either of those positions. So you can scratch those out. Another one I think you can scratch out is tight end, and this isn't necessarily so much because of the roster, although that plays a part. First of all, there's just not a roster spot, right? I mean, you've got tight end / H-backs already in Mercedes Lewis, Robert Tonyan, Jay Sternberger, Dominique Daphne, Josiah DeGuara. There's a real chance all five of those guys could make the roster. And, to trade up for a tight end is probably not feasible. Now, also, there's the bigger fact that the only tight end that's traded, that could potentially be traded up for, is that would be worth trading up for, I should say, is Kyle Pitts. And it seems insanely unlikely that he's going to get past, pick 10, or that Green Bay would package a bunch of picks to move up for a tight end, no matter how dominant that he is. So tight end is probably off the list as well. Wide receiver is an interesting one, but you have to think the top three in Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, and Jamar Chase are probably off that list. Now, maybe in some insane scenario, if Jamar Chase would fall to pick 10 and they could move up and use a first, a third, and a future first. But even then, reeks of nothing that Brian Gutekunst or the Packers would ever do, especially for a wide receiver. And I think that's my bigger takeaway here is like Green Bay's had the opportunity to stand pat where they've selected and have basically had very little interest in spending a premium draft pick on a wide receiver. So can you even possibly imagine them trading up for one? And again, in an insane scenario where a Jamar Chase starts to fall, maybe they could get involved in that conversation. But I just don't think that, again, any of the top three, Smith, Waddle, Chase, they're going to be in range to even potentially sniff. You know, a player like Kadarius Toney, Elijah Moore, I can't imagine Green Bay's moving up for more of a slot gadget wide receiver. Terrace Marshall, maybe Rashad Bateman, but those would be more guys that maybe they would consider at pick 29. I don't see them potentially moving up there. So wide receiver seems out, as does interior offensive line. You know, Landon Dickerson, Elijah Vera Tucker could be really good players. I just don't see Green Bay giving up premium picks to move up to get an interior offensive lineman, especially when they have some depth and talent there already and they've had such success drafting that type of position later in the draft. So to me, that's out as well. A defensive line, frankly, there's just not a defensive lineman that's worth trading up for. So I don't see that happening. Safety, Trevon Moehrig, maybe. Like he definitely fits a potential mold, and I just don't know. I can't see them, again, trading up for a safety when you've got Savage, who you've recently traded up for and is kind of your future at the position, and one of your leaders in Adrian Amos. Now, Amos may not be a long-term. They'll have to make a decision on him next year, so it's not entirely out of the question if they loved him, but that would be more of a, if he's there at pick 29, we'll consider it, more than, I could potentially see them trading up for a Trevon Moehrig, even though I think he fits the type of player that they like. Edge, I don't see anyone necessarily differentiating themselves, to move up for, rather than what you could just get by picking at pick 29. If they love someone, maybe, but remember, they just spent major draft capital on Rashawn Gary. It seems like Za'Darius is in their long-term plans, so moving up and giving up extra capital to go get another edge rusher doesn't seem super likely. It's a premium position, so I wouldn't rule it out entirely if they fell in love with someone, but again, I don't see that as being likely. Inside linebacker, maybe a couple here. I think Micah Parsons and Zaven Collins, if either of those started to fall, maybe into the early 20s, mid 20s, that Green Bay could potentially make a trade up for. Micah Parsons, much more unlikely, right? He would have to have, some of his off-field concerns come to fruition and teams be scared off by it, which if that's the case, Green Bay's probably leading the pack of teams that are being scared off by it. So that seems unlikely. I don't see more of the faster, undersized guys in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Jamin Davis, even though I really like both of them. I don't see that necessarily being something that Green Bay does. They usually like those more physical linebackers that can take on blockers, not the ones that are going to run around them. Zaven Collins makes some sense here. I could see him being somebody that maybe if they really loved, doing that Jordan Love type trade where they move up 4 spots, but let's also not forget that inside linebacker has not been a position that they've exactly valued a ton. So even though Collins potentially meets their thresholds and what they like at the position, it hasn't been a position that they've spent premium picks on. So not only using pick 29, but additional resources to trade up, even though it's a potential position of need, I just don't see Green Bay going in that direction. So that leaves 2 very obvious positions left. Not only are they positions of need short-term, but they're positions of need long-term. And there's really good, potential players that they could target by moving up maybe a few spots, or maybe even a little bit more than that if the right situation presented itself. I think corner's the first one here. I think it highly unlikely that Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn fall enough that Green Bay could get in those conversations. Caleb Farley's in the interesting situation where if he falls, it's likely due to injury concerns, which likely means that Green Bay is not going to be super excited to trade up picks to get in the conversation for Caleb Farley. So it's kind of one of those no-win situations where if the injuries are not a concern, he probably goes well before Green Bay could potentially trade up for him. And if they are a concern, Green Bay probably has no interest in trading up for him. So I don't think it's going to be him either. Newsome definitely could be in the conversation, but he's had some injury issues as well, which could scare away Green Bay from giving up additional draft capital. And then I think the other thing you have to remember about the corner position is it's a deep position and there's a lot of talent. Kelvin Joseph, Stokes from Georgia, Fatu Melifonwu, Asante Samuel, like those are all players that are likely going to go late first, early second. So do you want to give up premium picks or, an additional second, third, fourth round pick to move up a handful of spots? Now, if you love a guy, sure, but there may be a guy that's very, very similar if you just stand pat and you'd be able to keep some draft picks. So while there could be some opportunity at corner, I do think the depth of the position around where they're picking may make it unlikely that they could potentially target one of those corners. And then that brings us to offensive tackle. I talked about Christian Darrisaw yesterday. It really depends on how they view his athleticism. If they think he's ultra athletic, maybe they could take a move up for him. Tevin Jenkins, I think Tevin Jenkins could be one that's in the sweet spot here. Brian Bulaga comparisons have been made for Tevin Jenkins. I talked to Ben Fennell about him for today's audio version of the podcast, which I can't recommend enough. We talked about some of the top offensive tackles that Green Bay could target. I think Tevin Jenkins makes some sense. And then Liam Eichenberg is a really interesting study. He's kind of all over the map. There's people that love him. There's people that don't like him at all. He seems to fit very, very well in the Green Bay scheme and what they want to do. I think you could make a pretty immediate move for him moving over to right tackle. And if Green Bay fell in love with that type of player, I could see Green Bay maybe moving up a handful of spots to try to get a Liam Eichenberg. So, Tevin Jenkins or Liam Eichenberg at offensive tackle would be two players, maybe a Christian Darrisaw that they could potentially target. So as you look at the overall targets, I think Tevin Jenkins, Greg Newsome, Liam Eichenberg, maybe a Micah Parsons or a Zaven Collins. Those are the five to me that if Green Bay's looking to trade up, that those would be the potential players that they'd be targeting just based off of need, availability, where they can get in the draft, and what positions and players ultimately I think they may like and could potentially make sense in a trade up scenario. That's going to do it for me. As I mentioned, make sure to check out Ben Fennell and I in today's audio version of the podcast. We talked about some of the top offensive tackles and how they could fit in Green Bay. It's one I think you'll really, really enjoy, so make sure to check that out. I'll be right back here tomorrow. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'd greatly appreciate it. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.